Tonight's sermon is based on the topic that so many of you asked for: Wall Street whiplash and the expansion of life via man's secondary, intellectual, personalized existence. Specifically, what is known as the bigger fool theory, I thought we would start. That is having to do with stock market activity, for those of you who have never heard of it. And I didn't make this one up for a change. There's actually the bigger fool theory, and that is the belief in the market that under reasonable conditions, that if you buy a stock at a certain price, that eventually there's a bigger fool that will pay you more than you paid for it. This carries a certain, I understand, I'm led to believe, a certain real validity amongst those who do it, that is used partially in conjunction with not being so blown about by the ephemeral ups and downs of the marketplace that a good trader who understands this theory will simply hold on, assuming it was a reasonable stock to begin with, and the company, the operation still in business, that if you hold on to it long enough, based on this theory, that eventually there is a bigger fool. Now, would you care to try and apply that? Let's put it this way. Man's intelligence buying, that is accepting, you could say, ideas, parentheses, stock, but ideas, and then trying to eventually get even bigger fools to buy them from you. Now, this is beyond metaphor, as I hope you'll see. It is really symbolic because it flies both in what it appears to say and then something otherwise. Specifically like this, that once you have, at the ordinary level, bought, accepted, taken an idea from life, and we're talking, of course, polarized ideas. Once you have taken them, and insofar as is the fact that in the secondary world there is no intrinsic value to these ideas, no matter what they are, not vis-a-vis what we have been referring to as the primary ideas, that anything in the secondary world that you can name is truly without intrinsic value compared to that which it reflects in the primary world. And I think everyone can see that, can't you? Or shall I make it a little clearer? It's no cynicism, it's no criticism of ordinary existence. But the idea of fashion, for instance, whether you are the proud bearer of this season's hairdo, or whether you're out of style, it has no intrinsic value. You are back dealing with, at best, what ordinary people would say, the relative worth of secondary ideas. Or they might say the passing fads, the whims of fashion. And it can be true not just a hairdo, it can be true with your house. That those of you that are old enough, the 50s was the great era coming out of WW2, that if you grew out of Levittown and the real cookie boxes, you went into suburban ranch-style houses. And now they're so out of fashion that I understand that they're becoming retro hip. But at any rate, architecture, things that people paid, went in debt for 30 or 40 years, what they paid for went out of fashion. It's not that the house as a dwelling, the primary aspect of what a house is, it's not that that had no value, but insofar as the fashion, the hip, the end value of whether your house looks like, is that actually circa 55 suburban, or is that more a 67 neo California suburban? It's valueless. It has no intrinsic value. Now, some of you follow that, you have got to then see that with no critical comment, no inflection whatsoever, that simply secondary ideas have no intrinsic value. They are, as the ordinary mind would have it, as we were mentioning last time, they are at best relative. That is what fashion is about. That is what fads are about. That is what hip is about. 20 years before that, that was what hip was about. And then before that, that was what hip was about. Which those of you who never thought about it is a great example that I don't even think there's a word in the dictionary, that the word hip itself has been hip and unhip. And then it was help. But at any rate, there is no intrinsic value to the secondary ideas. So what we're still aiming at, what we started out talking about, the bigger fool theory. It is not that the ideas that you personally entertain are foolish. It is that any ideas that you have purchased out on the market, that is, if you're just operating at the ordinary level of intelligence, whatever your intellect is feeding off of, came from the stock market, came from the marketplace, and they're secondary ideas, whatever they are. They're secondary ideas, and hence they have no intrinsic value. And although the intellect is simply an energy transformer, when it thinks about such ideas, as we all know, it would attempt to it has to, because of the polarization of energy, it would put some judgment on even what we're saying now. So it would find some ideas to be better, some to be worse, but it's not the case if you begin to follow this. The ideas you have are simply the ways in which your intellect, your wiring system, has been wired and primed to transform energy. So all ideas you have are secondary and sans any intrinsic value. But thus, once you have them, and the intellect never understands this, but if it did, that's what we're trying to get to now. If it did, it would have a sensation, I suggest to you, not unlike is inherent in the bigger fool theory. That Jesus, I got all these ideas which are my brain, this continual polarization, this activity, is me. And if you had a flash and it's all of no value intrinsically, would it not seem quite possible in the world down the city, which is not us, where it's full of smartasses and cynics, to find yourself in possession of biscuit brain stock, just useless stock that you were a fool had you actually bought it, but you're a fool to have it in the city. What are people inclined to do if they find themselves with a sack of water buffalo excrement? I don't know how you had it, but there you are on the streets of Manhattan. What are most people inclined to do? I don't know why. I'll say theoretically or rhetorically. People want to share it. Like, here I am with this foolish stock. It's city level. Now take it truly, symbolically, as far as you can. What are people inclined to do? Don't just laugh in some passing cynical fashion. Think about it. Think about people continually driven to talk, to tell what kind of guy they are, to tell what they think, to tell even ideas that seem to the immediate environment ridiculous, that they will say it. And you, if you could stand back and you are inclined to think in such a manner, you or anyone at the ordinary level, you might think, why in the world would that person come up with this theory? Or I've heard him repeat this kind of crap before, but why in the world would he do it here? Because if he had one cylinder hitting tonight, he would have known that he's going to say that, and he would be set up on that everybody at this party or this room would go, come on, you're an idiot. Why would he do it? Well, as far as I know, he is not a card-carrying member of the International Masochist Society. Why would he do it? I'm suggesting to you it's part of the bigger fool theory. That there the ordinary intellect is. It does not know what we're talking about, and of course forgetting ideas that subconsciously it knows all this. It doesn't know this, because if there was a subconscious, they would be talking about the energy behind all this like we're attempting to do, and if they were going to talk about that, they would have nothing to say, because energy don't talk. It makes noise, and you translate it. For the intellect is keep fine-tuning this $59 shortwave radio, which, in case you never had one, they're real good about picking up noise. If you're into noise, they'll get all kinds of noise. Insofar as actually picking up something that makes sense, even in another language, kind of iffy, but it's up to the intellect to take this noise and go, aha. So here you are with aha. Here you are with this noise. Here you are with this stock. Here you are with these ideas that, truth be known, They have no intrinsic value. None. It's then as though the intellect has got to press forward while knowing this and not knowing it. But while the reality of it be, if the truth be known, that it has no intrinsic value, it's as though you press on, sort of operating on the assumption that there are other fools somewhere, bigger fools, that in some way will participate in your folly. I mean, in your questionable purchases of this stock. Would you care for us to take a short moment here for reflection? Do I have to bring out all the examples? I can almost use the verbal intercourse of ordinary life. Just stick my finger in anywhere. Well, as you people like to say, does that not explain a lot? Of course, you like to say that when it seems to explain a lot. You know, where are you when you're sitting there looking like, and it doesn't seem to explain a lot? Why don't you join in then and say, hey, that explains a lot? It's all right. I'll do it for us. That doesn't explain. Yes, that explains a lot. Think about it. I thought that the example I used perhaps would be rather archetypical. But think about all the things that people say that seem to go nowhere, that seem to be self-defeating. They'll say things that seem to invite ridicule when they are not known in the community as being that self-effacing. And you think, why would somebody say something like this? Why would somebody make a fool of themselves verbally? And think about all the examples, locally, internationally, big shots, little shots, half shots. What if it is seeking the bigger fool? It's like, I might say this. I'm going to say that I do believe that flying saucers are coming from an underground cave in Albania, and that's why the Albanian government has kept that country closed in a singular manner. And it's almost, and of course I'm making all this up, because no one's intellect would operate this way, but I'm talking about the energy that life needs coming out through man in a secondary fashion. It would not be impossible for my description to have some backstage validity if we get behind the flats and the scenery. And it might be, hey, it is as though the person would say, there's not a chance looking around at this party or the group where I am, I bet nobody's going to believe this. But hey, there's got to be a bigger fool in the world than me. Give it a shot. And so the person goes, rah, 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 rah. And almost everybody goes, oh. But maybe one person comes up later and says, have you ever written, do you have a paper or a monograph on this? Or could I meet you later and talk about this? And then, of course, if you're the ordinary intellect, you could say, well, to what avail? When do people do that? Hey, don't ask dumb questions. Why do people do anything in the city? It's just a hobby. It's the secondary world. That's what that is. And don't worry about just somebody saying, making a verbal faux pas or talking about something that's considered to be extreme like flying saucers. How about all forms of religion? How about people debating political philosophies? How about people arguing about anything, social mores, individual behavior on the basis that if you were staying aside, well, fact it, you're observing two other people, but how about if you were watching your own brain in operation, but see two people, and one of them say, why don't you do so-and-so? And you think, hey, they've been through this 100 times, this dance. My mother and father, my sister and her husband, or me and somebody else. This is a waste of time. They keep fighting the same dance. Quick! Call an emergency psychologist and bring them over here. Somebody's got to help these people. They keep playing out this same damn dance over and over and over. And it seems to be what? The big F. Not the Frankfurter, the big futility. And you think, we need a psychiatrist here. We need somebody to help these people. I wish you wouldn't laugh during important episodes. So see, we've already gone from examples into the great world of psychology and psychiatry and religion, but if you want to stay in psychology, and people apparently pay, well, they say they do, great amounts of money. They go into analysis. Now I think they make house calls or have 911 numbers, and they'll come and they'll counsel. They'll counsel. They'll interact with couples. That how long have you people been arguing about this one thing, about how you didn't show up on time on the wedding day and how it's made her I don't know if any of you know, Freud had a great-grandson that lived in Mississippi. I just wanted to... Well, I didn't want to get you tied up with unusual terminology, but the guy shows up to counsel the couple, and it turns out on their wedding day, the groom was 3.5 hours late with no notice, didn't call, and since then, the bride has had a nervous condition. As far as and so the counselor says, well, when did this happen? And the bride says, or maybe the groom says, 22 friggin' years ago. All right. So here we are in psychology. Here we are in the ordinary level of human intercourse as people are amazed. They're confounded. They think something's wrong, that these people keep playing out the same thing and it never gets anywhere. He says, rah, 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 rah. She goes, rah, 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 and they keep saying the same things. What's wrong with those people? Think about the bigger fool theory. What if one day that they've been saying these same things, that you can stand behind the door and you can write their script? I think they even call it that. And he goes, how dare you do so-and-so? How come dinner's never done? She says, how come you're never here on time? And every night you tell me, well, I had to stop and have a beer with her. Why do we do that? And you think, well, they keep doing that. They're not even listening. They keep saying the same things. But what if? What if one day she says, why do you stop and have a beer with the boys and then you come in late and accuse me of not having dinner ready on time when it was ready? And they're doing this for what? The 2,479th time. And he says, well, it's because I work so hard, I need to stop and relax. And she goes, well, I never thought of that. So you're not going to find a psychiatrist or a psychologist or an ordinary intellect because of the way life has worked that's going to say, well, that's possible. Hell yeah, it's possible. Now, you've got to admit that. Sequentially, rhetorically, that is possible. Is it going to happen? But is it possible? Yeah. But is it going to happen? It has probably less of a chance than it does for it to turn out that so-called UFOs are coming from Albania. And yet, you could say by all scientific knowledge, there either are no UFOs or even better yet, there is no Albania. Don't Albanians write me? So you could say that, but then you'd have to, what I wanted you to see was, relatively speaking, that something that is as common as me saying one day during an ordinary polarized dance between two people, replaying the same thing over and over, that one day after 21 years, one of them says so-and-so, the same thing, and no one goes, geez, you're right, I never thought of that. That's not weird. It's not, that could happen just like that, right? Well, other than the fact that it can't happen. But can you see one of the possibilities? One way to look at it, it is the continual search based upon the bigger fool theory. That in some way the guy is saying it, if we're going to play psychology just for a second. I'll take the guy's part, the example I just used. It's like he's come up with this idea. He don't know where he got it. He bought this stock. He found himself. He inherited the stock. He inherited this genetically, that he finds, that he works. And the whole schmear, I can't go through everything. Being married and the complaints he has, and he wish he hadn't got married, and he wish he had got married. His whole life. Being a part of this gigantic, cosmic, electrical nexus, and he stops every night to get a beer after work. And if we held him down and tortured him, put him on his own little wheel, he might say, I don't know, I'm tired of drinking, I no longer enjoy it, and I feel bad the next day. Well, why don't you stop? I don't know, probably I need a psychiatrist, I can't afford one, beer is cheaper. But we got to jump in right quick, artificially and arbitrarily, into the ordinary flow, the progress of human life, that this guy, every afternoon after work, he goes in, he has a beer. All right, so we can say that that's the stock he's got. And in some way, that if he could be questioned in a certain way, that he might say, I don't like this. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my life is kind of a bad stock, if you want to call it that. I'm kind of a fool to live like this. And my name's named Roger Miller. But I'm sort of a fool to live like this. And so you say, okay. Then, does it not begin to make a little, I won't say make sense, a different vista of people continuing to play out, not just actively their role, but to talk about their role. That what if there is a bigger fool and I can unload my life? Secondary, you can unload your primary life. Well, unless you want to give all you've got to the ground. Mother Earth is always waiting. She will always eat. But the secondary life, nobody can take all you've got. You can't really hand it over, but it's as though, what if I could get somebody? All right, back to my little made-up example. What would happen to an ordinary person? Just think about it. If after these years, I assume you all followed my little scenario, this little byplay of the guy stopping, having a beer, coming in, he hollers, "Where's supper?" And he's 5 days a week, year in, year out, he does it. And she keeps making supper on time. That 21 years ago, they decided, the first week or so that they were married, he had the same job, and she figured out he left work and he was home between 20 and 25 minutes, and so she would have the meatloaf and everything ready. She did that for a week, and then he started stopping for a beer. And since then, for 20 years and 11 months and 2 weeks, he's never been on time, but she continues to put the food in, and it continues to burn and get stale. And he continues to come in and holler, "Where's supper?" And she puts it down, and she says, "Well, it's cold." And he says, "Well, why?" And she says, "Well, why don't you come home? I know where you did. You stopped and had a beer." And he threatens her. And then this one time, after all this time, she says, "Why do you do this?" And he says, "I don't know. It seems like the pressure of my job and etc. And just, I don't know. It just feels like I have to." She goes, "Oh, well, I'm sorry. I never thought about that. Well, I'll start something over right quick. Here, have a snack, and I'll fix you up something real good." If this happened, what would he do? We do understand, as we were discussing last time, in the secondary world, in the ordinary world of man, this could not happen. But if it did, that would be the end of the line. Their relationship, remember I pointed out there are only 2 possibilities, and one of them's the only one, but we'll say 2. The relationship would disappear. It would disappear into modulation. That would be the end of them. Their relationship. It is actually, if this happened, would be the reversing of the polarity in their relationship. But I assume all of you can get a quick grasp of that. Even a psychologist. Surely there's got to be some by now. I'm sure there are that just mechanically have been driven to the point that they could understand, or it's happened in their experience, that what seems to be the conflict between a couple is that one of them seems to become a little more enlightened. That is, seems to get better, that the treatment seems to take, and what happens? In case you don't know, it's almost a fait accompli before they ever start, that if treatment succeeded, that is, to make your marriage better, and one of them got better, the treatment's going to kill the relationship. In other words, then they could say, well, it's a failure, but you've got to see failure is success. Failure, the mistakes of life, are the reverse polarization of what would be success. It shows life still alive and growing. But I was asking you rhetorically. I didn't mean to answer it all for you. And I guess you did by your laughter and your snorts. That what if, after all these years, that the guy went blah, 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 and he sang his tune, and she went, in other words, a bigger fool bought the stock. What would that do to the person that's been living that stock for their life? That's why life does not operate that way. It's just little small forms of suicide. It'd be like life having little varicose veins, little busted small blood vessels in its own nervous system. But notice that humanity continues to beat their brains and holler, why do people keep living the same life over and over? Why do people keep yammering the same scripts back and forth to each other? Think about the bigger fool theory. I don't guess life needs me to advertise it, but may I ask you rhetorically again, can you see how deathly, not deathly, deathly, life disseminates its various secondary energies, especially in the secondary world of man's verbalization, for its own growth? That the very things that from one view, quite properly, quite understandably, could be seen as almost being deadlocks, being gridlock. That is, of 2 people, this couple over here, been married 21 years, and by and large their conversation is scripted. Miss Psychology, I think, likes us, that they just keep saying the same crap back and forth, and you can say, well, God, what a dead end. You know, what a terrible marriage. I mean, they don't listen to each other. There's no intellectual excitement. They just sitting there, and they keep, I hid behind the door here all these months, they say the same thing. He'll say this, and I can tell you beforehand, I can go, meh, meh, meh. She'll say this, and they'll go, rah, 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 rah. And you think, boy, what a standstill. Tut, tut. What a standstill brain it would be for somebody to say that. You do not see that it is deft, exhilarating, quite handy, the way life moves energy about. Because you can look at both of them. It's, of course, not just the man, the example I made. It's like both of them have got stock ideas. Their nervous system works in a certain way up here, in a way that if they could think in this manner, they'd consider, I was a fool to buy this stock. Or you may read this if you're really good. God, am I a fool to be me? What if I can get somebody else to share in this? What if I can sit this bag down since I'm here in Manhattan and knowing how people are, and the fumes are such that they probably can't tell what's in the bag. What if I sit here and turn my back? In other words, you seem to be obligated for some reason. Don't ask me how. You're carrying around this sack, of water buffalo doo-doo. If I sit here for a minute and like reach in my pocket like I'm looking at my watch or looking for a map, surely somebody will come up and snatch it. It's like if I keep talking about what a fool I am, maybe somebody will help me carry this load. Maybe somebody go, wow, can I participate in being part of you or these ideas? I mean, it's not going to happen in that manner, but does that not give you some way behind the scenes, something that the ordinary intellect would never come up with, but just another description of energy at a primary level operating in a way that cannot necessarily be seen as having a direct connection between the actual operations of human life in the city. But that some of this that would seem to be truly, from ordinary view, emotional, verbal, cul-de-sacs, merry-go-rounds, are not. It is a most efficient dissemination of energy. It is like both parties, all parties, having this foolish stock. And it's like, well, at least I got 65, 72 years to find some fool bigger than me to either unload it, which of course you can't do literally, but like to join in, to participate with me, to go, I like that. Or really? Well, I never thought about that. Or come here, let's dance. That like, and nobody can describe it this way, but that would be some relief. I don't think I will, since some of you seem to enjoy this, I don't think I'll end up this paragraph by giving you the blues and asking such a question like, does that ever happen? Or even asking this, if it did happen, would it actually be a relief? I didn't say that. I had in mind a kind of sequentially crushed tale, I guess, that I thought some of you might be able to tie to this. I let it come out in a Kairoot very recently. But the tale went like this, the little story. It's real short. I'm even talking about short. A sentence. The tale was like this. There was this city, this place, and they gave the powers that be, the ruler, gave the people the vote. And the people were really excited and danced and whirled about for somewhere between 3 and 5 hours, hooped and hollered. But what wasn't said was that your vote won't count. As an aside, the interview began to enjoy, not because I do them, but to enjoy looking at, even I am wont to try to describe this. It may not stop me. I don't foresee any joyful resolution to this, but I can't resist. Of hearing such things as my short story, this people somewhere were given the right to vote, which most people hearing this were brought up in a Western, democratic, free market ambiance, and feel like, yes, that's the way the gods intended it. that, boy, if I had grown up living in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, or Albania under tyranny, what a relief that one day something happens and they say, you now have the right to vote. Now I thought, well, now the gods are shining upon us. But take the story, they gave the people the right to vote. Yay! But sotto voce, the powers went, no, it ain't going to count. Now don't take that as just being some kind of little smart aleck story or sentence. Think about how this could work. I'm still at the part that I said I don't foresee any joyful resolution. But don't any of you begin to enjoy on your own that this kind of possible scenario, they give them the right to vote. Now try for a second, maybe this will help. Try and jog your intellect in such a way that you can separate. I just put a comma there. They gave the people the right to vote. Make it a serious comma. You've almost got to go into another orbit. But they didn't point out to them it's not going to count. And me asking you whether you cannot begin to enjoy this, then let's try it this way. What's the difference? What difference would that make? Of course, there obviously is always two possible answers. The positive end of the magnet and the negative end. That is, well, it would make all the difference in the world. Or, I might point out to you, in a sense, it would make no difference in the world. What if they announce you've got the right to vote, and the powers never said it won't count? And they went through the full formalities you're familiar with in the Western world, that they run it, they have people there, and they make you register, and they have people checking your ID. They do it just as strictly by the book. They take all the votes in. They have guards there. They have the prime minister. They have the head of their institutional religion, and they take them in the room under official guard and seal. And of course, they go in there and they have a sandwich and smoke around, and the ruler decides what the outcome is. And it's announced, and they shake all the boxes, and they show these big old totals they have, and the people never know. Back to my symbolic question. What difference does it make? What makes all the difference in the world? What difference does it make? Then you say, well, it makes no difference at all. All right, you got two. Now, how about this? What difference does all that make? You don't begin to enjoy this? Because they're both true. You can say, well, it makes all the difference in the world. To say, all right, we're giving you the right to vote, but it's not going to count. Don't ask me what difference it makes. It makes all the difference in the world. And that doesn't even, well, that's as strong as you can say it. Because you don't have the vote if it's not going to count. So it makes all the difference in the world. Okay, you got me. But how about this? What if they never know and nothing happens in life, nothing happens in their existence that would even indicate that their vote didn't count? How the hell would they ever know? And then you can say, well, all right, if you're going to push it that way, it doesn't make any difference. Well, you should like both of those. But then the third part is, well, what difference does both of that make? That is, whether it makes a difference or whether it doesn't. What difference does that make? All right. Back to the main paragraph. I just wish some of you would enjoy. See if you'd, well, of course, then we'd have these tapes down instead of me talking for 60 minutes. We'd get down to 6 minutes because I just give just the openings I had in mind for when I say it's a paragraph, like, all right, here we go, a little tale. A place that the powers gave the people the right to vote, but didn't tell them this. It wasn't going to count. We could just do that, and all of you go, Then I could go, all right. Next paragraph. Well, no offense to you, but when you get good, of course, that's the way it happens. I won't point out what that does to, what do they call it in the city? Your ennui tolerance, your what do they call keeping your mind on something? I can't say. Well, back to the main part of back to the main part. I was going to see if you could tie some of this to what we're already talking about. Could you see that on this basis it would not be unlike, to really get symbolically again, not unlike life letting people apparently have their own ideas, their own dreams, their own desires. It's just they don't count. But you can apparently have them. You talk about them. Everybody does. the secondary world wouldn't run. We've all established that. You people convinced me of that. If it wasn't for people having dreams, even to the point of Mr. and Ms. La Mancha and their family, the impossible dreams. But hey, that's what life's about, right? That's what the poets and all sorts of people say. But it's like life lets every person individually. If you're the lowest little person living in a little basement, that everybody has their little dreams, their own plans, their own vote. Except life just never points out that you can have it, but it doesn't count. Then you can say, wait a minute. Now, if you're ordinary, you could say, wait a minute. Of course, I don't like people that say, wait a minute, because right away you know they're going to be some kind of smart ass. But if that was your intellect, speaking generically, then I could say, well, wait a minute. What difference does it make? And you say, it makes all the difference in the world. I had these great dreams. I wanted to be somebody. I wanted to be a contender in my field. And if you're going to say that life doesn't let it count, then that makes all the difference in the world. But wait a minute. What if you never know it? That is, you seem to have this talent, or at least you have this interest that you want to be a great musician, a great writer, a painter, an athlete. And you do everything that seems to be proper to you. That is, you do everything that would seem to be proper for a voter. You go out and you register to vote. You go on the voting day. You faithfully go into the booth and you seriously study it. All right, you spent 20 or 30 years. You practice your zither. We won't go into why you didn't get... Anyway, you practice. You write your zither symphonies. You go out. You try. You keep up with the latest in zither technology. You keep up with what other people... In other words, you do everything that you apparently should have done to pursue your dream. And let us say, here it is, you are 65, and let's assume that you're just reasonably intelligent by city standards. You know that the world is full of people. And you've met them. You've got to admit, after a few drinks, you've met people that write better zither music than you do. Oh, I know, when you're around a convention or you're really sober, you probably badmouth them and say, well, or if you deny you ever heard of him. But you've got to admit, just an ordinary person. Here you are on your deathbed, and still just reasonably intelligent. What difference? You're going to have to admit, if I say, well, wait a minute, your whole life you dreamed of being famous in your field. Yes, I did. And I know you worked. I followed your career. Yes, I did. Well, no offense. I'm not trying to give you the blues on top of you being here dying. But, just for the sake of philosophical consideration, can we say that you actually succeeded in the way in which you wanted to? And you'd say, well, no. And I'd say, well, do you feel real bad about it? And you'd say, well, I guess it'd been more fun. I wish my music had been played and et cetera. But if I said, well, do you take it personally? Do you feel like there was some sort of conspiracy against you in life? And you go, well, no. And I'd say, well, you might by then say, getting a certain amount of deathbed clarity, you might say, well, I've even known people that do have more talent than I do, and hell, they did less well than I did. I did make a few bucks. I almost made a living. So, no, I don't take it personally. Aha! Now listen. And then you said, yeah, but it makes all the difference in the world. Life lets you have your dreams, your ideas, your own little silly stock, but your own ideas, except they just don't count. And you say, yeah, but that makes all the difference in the world. But follow my example. If you didn't know that, what difference does it make? Because a reasonable man doesn't take it personally. Well, that's just the way the chips fall. Maybe it's zither music. Maybe I was born in the wrong generation. Maybe I lived in the wrong place. I should have moved out to Detroit where zither music is hotter. But if I said, but you don't take it as being some sort of personal conspiracy aimed at you directly. Well, no, that's ridiculous. No, I don't. But do you follow me? Then what difference does it make? If indeed what I'm just ringing about to kill a little time, that if, like giving the people the right to vote, but then not adding, it's not going to count. They let everybody have their own dreams, their own ideas, their plans. Life lets you work for it. It's just your dreams, your plans, your apparent individual ones that you inherited the same way you did your stock, the fool stock. You've got them, and life doesn't come down and in the middle of the bell curve of humanity, it doesn't come down and crush everybody's little dream. But it's just how many famous serious zither music composers can there be in one generation? And so you accept it. Life didn't come down and say, all right, everybody's trying to be famous. Everybody wants to be a good writer on this planet. Hold your hand up. Everyone wants to be a bestseller. and you hold up your hand and life goes, ha ha! You know, life doesn't do that. It's just, people do not take that kind of failure, lack of success, personally. So now back to me saying, if I ask you, well, what if it's true that life lets everybody have their own dreams? It just doesn't count for anything. In other words, life doesn't take it into account. You got all these dreams and it's just meaningless, if you want to put it crudely. And you can say, well, it makes all the difference in the world. Do you see that it may not? In the same way, if the voters, the people had the right to vote and it didn't count and they didn't know any better, and nothing blatant happened in their life to make them say, wait a minute, my vote's not counting. You mean, you think it's a conspiracy that they just don't want your vote to count? No, I guess you're right. That's stupid. In the same way, well, I've tried to live my life. I had my own dreams or things I wanted to do. Well, did you succeed? Well, certainly not like I intended. I mean, look at me. Would you take it personally? Well, no, I don't take it personally. Maybe I should have tried harder. And life goes, right, I should have tried harder. Nobody likes that? At least I assume, I didn't get confused, I assume that you don't see any possible, as the president would say, linkage between this and the bigger fool stock theory, right? Don't get them confused. Don't let them even get close to each other, because they might be like white bread and mayo. They might try to leap together and make a sandwich before you knew it, despite your best laid plans not to eat any more white bread sandwiches. So don't let them get confused. There was another little story. It's a grand night for stories. There's another little story that has no connection, but I just thought of it. There was this little place where the ruler thought, he might have even said, I don't know. First time I hear these stories, even I'm sometimes a little confused. But at least he thought to himself, or he thought somewhere. I don't know whether it's to himself, but the ruler in this place thought, here we have a singular situation. We have a singular arrangement, a unique covenant, an unusual bargain, semicolon. The people can say whatever they wish, and I can do whatever I want. Think about that. In the same way, I don't have to go back and back up about the other story. If you could hear it enough, that's enough. I didn't have to do any more of this story. Because it's not just some smart-ass little something I made up. Think about it. It's not connected to anything we've been talking about, of course. But if you're in a place, and the ruler, for those of you really taking notes in invisible ink, instead of worrying about a people and a ruler, of course, talking about the kingdom of the brain. But this ruler points out that we have a most splendid arrangement between me and not me. Is the not me, the people, can say whatever they wish. Now, of course, if we're actually talking about Paul Psi, if we're talking about political arrangements out here, we're talking about people who got not only the vote, we're talking about some nice arrangements for these people. Not only got the vote, they can say whatever they please. No censorship. They don't worry about the ruler looking over their shoulder. These neurons that are apparently not in particular arrangement, or at least not in charge right now, that is your own brain firing off, they can say whatever they please. Now that is a free people. That is free ideas, right? That's ideas that are not fool stock. Say whatever I want. Except the ruler also was pointing out to whoever it was he was thinking this for. They can say whatever they please. But this beautiful arrangement we have is that then I can do whatever I please. I guess some of you, if you were ordinary, could say, well, wait a minute, that ain't much of an arrangement. That's no bargain. Really? Even if we were talking about ordinary external affairs, which of course we are, so you thought I'd say not, which we're not. If the people didn't like the arrangement, they will hold what used to be known as Latin American elections. They didn't worry about ballots on a little piece of paper. All ballots weighed about 2.3 grams. My vote is shoot the president. Well, they cut down a whole lot on that unsightly advertising of billboards and vote for me, and it's all over with. So you could say, well, that's not a bargain. I mean, that's really some kind of tyrant. That's not only a tyrant saying that. That is a smart-ass tyrant. That he says, well, the people we got a great arrangement. They can say whatever they want, whatever they please. The bargain is, I can do whatever I please. Now, again, if you were ordinary, you could react to the same way that I spoke for you, that you would to the bigger fool stock theory, to the story about the people have the right to vote. It's just that it doesn't count. And I said, what difference does it make? And both times, all of you, the whole world would say, what do you mean what difference? It makes every bit of difference. And I could say, is this a bargain? And you can say, bargain? That's no bargain. That's some kind of facade. That's a charade. That's some kind of devious, regal trickery again. No wonder we had to do away with royalty. That's no bargain. He's just letting the people say wherever they want to. And the story, the way I hear it, if you're ordinary, was, well, he doesn't take any account. Probably not. Or maybe he does. What difference does that make? Well, that makes all the difference in the world, because now if what he does is based on what they say, it makes all the difference in the world. It does. We've been through this, same thing with the first two paragraphs tonight. Well, certainly it makes a difference. Now wait, maybe I misunderstood your story. Now if you're saying that he lets the people say whatever they want, and then he says he does whatever he wants, but if you're saying that whatever it is that he does, that he says he wants, if it's based upon a full consideration, a study of what the people say, then that's one thing. That would make all the difference in the world, really? Come on, give me a break. Do I have to show you how it might not? All right, what if he says, well, he's already told you, let's say that he told you this, that here in my kingdom we have a beautiful arrangement. I let the people say whatever they please. Then I do whatever I want. And so, the people, they all come out. It's like once a day, let's say, or once a week. They're probably busy. It's say whatever you please day. And let's say the king shows up. He'll come out and sit on a balcony. He pulls a chair down there, and he lets people stand there and say whatever they please. And he takes notes, apparently. In other words, you got the vote. You got the vote. You come in there. They take your vote and put it in a box. King sits there and you listen. And what if they even know the arrangement? That he is the monarch. That he is the sole power. Don't anybody now forget and think that I'm not talking about politics and we're thinking about your own nervous system up here. Don't get confused now. We're talking about politics. And so he goes, and he goes away. And then he does do action because he's the guy in charge of doing things. How would the people ever know if he paid no attention? If nothing very untoward happened in life, which I got to point to you, nothing untoward happens in anybody's life normally. Well, unless a volcano erupts, unless you die. But the rest of the time, what goes on? Well, I'm not famous. I've been just faithfully writing my zither music all these years. But people don't see it as a great calamity. Just one day they suddenly wake up and go, I'll never be famous. Nobody will ever play my zither symphonies. It's all a gradual process. That's what processes are about. And so would the people ever know whether the king, the ruler, did what he wanted without any consideration of what they said? Would it make any difference? Yeah, it would. Come on, we've been through that. Well, as long as you don't get allow any confusion for you to think that this story had anything to do with the second story, or that second story had anything to do with the bigger fool stock theory. So even if you don't understand or feel like you don't this, at least be clear in your mind that there is no connection. None. There was one grand story I wanted to tell tonight. 8 minutes. Hell, that's enough for a grand story. I'll tell you what to do. I'll do my own version of Eva Roy. I need more than 8 minutes. Make it 12 minutes. No. I need $10,000. We don't have it. Put down 10. All right. Well, I guess we've got to move fast. Here it is, the grand story. No connection to any of it, but I just wanted to end with on a lighter note. Don't make me sing a lighter note again. My escape is that in zither music there are no lighter notes. Unless, of course, you've been accustomed to listening to accordion music, and then I guess, relatively speaking, you might think, hey, that's pretty groovy. If groovy was still a help word. All right, the story goes like this. That there is another place where once a month the people are allowed to realize and verbalize, that's parentheses, but are allowed to realize the primary basis for all of their secondary activities. Once a month. No big deal, right? Up! Wait. Once a month, and I'm inferring through this little story that these creatures in this other place are not all that dissimilar to humans. But once a month, they're just freely allowed. It happens that they fully realize and can verbalize if they see fit, but they individually realize the primary basis for all of their secondary activities. For instance, men and women. For that they have no struggle to define, to rationalize, I'm just going to use ordinary words, to try and explain their purchases, their pursuit of fashion. They simply realize that all of it, all of fashion, even with men perhaps even trying to get a new car, put in some new mud flaps, it's all simply a raw drive to attract sex. It's not that this is a great secret, especially with women. Almost any woman in the city you can say, well, that's all. Now, why do you feel good dressed up? Other than some material feels good and all that. But why the whole thing about fashion? And you can tell a woman, say, don't tell me that you won't be fashionable or that you have some social position to uphold. It is simply a matter to attract sex, a sexual partner. And women all over the world go, but notice you don't think about it. Not because it's right or wrong. It's because it is now a secondary activity. It is a secondary variation of it. Because if it was still at the primary level, what would be going on? Woman being driven like everybody else, but the hormones, the polarity driven to attract a sexual partner. The way to attract a sexual partner, if we're going to get to the primary level, is you rip off your clothes, and is that last, if you remember, is rear elevation. Was that backdrop of last time we met? In other words, just rip off your clothes and assume the position, as they say in boot camp, for those of you who never... Well, at any rate, I'm just pointing out that would be it. You would act like a good horny beaver or something. You just take off your clothes and you'd back up to a man that your hormones seem to, say, well, he's my type. You'd rip off your clothes, you're a woman, and you'd back up. Well, I suspected that some of you would giggle. But that would be the primary operation of this. Face it, it would. Not right or wrong. But now it is a secondary reflection, normally known as romance, and tied in with family and etc., and civilization and society. But that's all it is, if it was brought to the primary level. Because there is no exception. I've already offered to let you can do it on your own, besides the 3 S's of sex and sustenance and shelter. From that groweth... Did I write Ecclesiastes? From that groweth all secondary activities. From that cometh everything from miniskirts to disco, radio, Paul Harvey, Catholicism, hairdos. From those 3 floweth everything. Well, men, if you're going to pick it on men, men would just for that one day realize that there are other ways to look at some of these, because all of this flows back to the three, but I'm just giving you real short ones are running out. But men would realize that their interest in sports, them eyeballing wrecks, forms of so-called romance, getting closer to raw sex, that men realize that all of that they can talk about all they want to and say, well, it's fun to keep up with the statistics. It is a civilized clothing and bathing, a certain kind of cleaning up of simply raw aggression. But the overlap I was going to throw in with men, even part of the sex, as I mentioned, is autos. Men, I'm just using good old archetypical shortcuts, cliches of men living their car. But there's one way to look at that it is an outgrowth that could vary from a man to man or from one man from one time to another, is him trying to find women, trying to attract sex. But it's also a man just getting in a car when it's not that, just going real fast so he might kill himself. It is an outgrowth of a kind of aggression. What if? Well, in all forms of struggling for social position, that many things could be called of trying to be in fashion, trying to have a car that looks decent. You can say, well, I've got a position in society. I have to do it because of my job and all that. Yak. That's the secondary world going on. But everything about social position, you're talking about one thing. If it's carried back to the primary level, you're talking about simply the rankings inside of a pack. That's all it is. It's whose rear end you're going to sniff and who's going to sniff yours. That is the primary level of it. That's it. Everything else about, well, I have a certain position. I've got to uphold my position. I've got to drive a certain kind of car or they'll look at me funny down at the office. I might not get promoted. I know all that's true. But consider it, there is a primary basis behind all of this. And all of that has no intrinsic value. The intrinsic value is always back at the primary level. And of course, there's no need for an ordinary person living a secondary life to have any knowledge of this. They couldn't. They would just find it to be either a smart aleck joke or just a frivolous comment. But you recall I suggested that some of you could find it to be a worthwhile method. Just your own interest in life, your own activities, is try and have a kind of continual consideration, a kind of running silent inventory of just being aware. I've already given you the three answers. You can look at them as being sex and food and shelter. But to see how subtle it gets, how tricky it gets, the things you're doing that you take to be, if you're operating at the ordinary level, that you take to be of extreme importance. Or that you might say, if I suddenly jumped out of the bushes into your brain and say, hey, why didn't you ever follow up me saying, why didn't you try and see how the primary basis behind everything you do? And you go, wait a minute, this is too tricky. You don't know. I'm all involved here. I'm trying to, in my own individual entrepreneurial spirit, I'm trying to overtake this certain business, and it has all kinds of ramifications fiscally, psychologically. It has nothing to do with that. That's crap. It's one of the three, but the rest of it flows out. It becomes more and more apparently intricate. I'll have to give you the wrap-up next time. Between now and then, at least everybody keep your eye out for a bigger fool. And stay away from mirrors.